Welcome to the Shofar podcast with Hebrew Usher.
Shalom, welcome back to episode 2 of the Shofar podcast with Hebrew Usher. We will be continuing under our main topic or our main theme of narcissism and the faith. However, there is a slight detour. We're going to change slightly from the original plan and we're going to insert one part, and that will be the narcissistic supply. Remember that when we talk about narcissism or the narcissistic personality disorder, we're not necessarily talking about full-blown narcissism. We're also talking about narcissistic traits, which we hope that by listening to this podcast, you'll be able to identify. And having identified them, there are other areas which you can learn from to correct yourself and also to help others as well. In this episode, we'll do a brief recap of what we spoke about in season 1. We will continue to define what the narcissistic supply is. Then we'll look at how narcissistic supply manifests itself in people who don't necessarily have narcissistic traits and those who do have or are narcissists. From there, then we'll look at how does the narcissistic supply work. Continuing from that, then we'll look at narcissistic supply in relationships. Let's get straight into it and go into episode 2. Initially, we were going to talk about narcissism in relationships. However, following the last episode, I realized that the definitions are also quite important, especially for people who are not familiar with NPD or the narcissistic personality disorder, who might not be familiar with some of the concepts that we're discussing. I don't think I'll be doing them justice by recording this podcast if I don't delve a little bit deeper and explain some of the concepts, especially this concept of the narcissistic supply. And if we don't understand the narcissistic supply, my concern is that some of the episodes might not make as much sense as I would hope, or they might not be as comprehensive as I hope. Let's recap on what we discussed previously. If you remember, we talked about narcissism. We defined what narcissism is. We said, firstly, it's a mental disorder where there is an inflated sense of self. There's a deep need for excessive attention and admiration. There's a lack of empathy towards others. Narcissistic supply is the fuel that powers narcissism. This is the input that keeps narcissism going, or it keeps the narcissist continuing in the patterns that they have started. So in relationships, basically the narcissistic supply is what we give to the narcissist and ensures that they continue doing as they do. So when we talk about the narcissistic supply, we can look at the definition as follows. Starting from narcissistic personality disorder, which is about a self-serving behavior and preservation. So the narcissist trying to preserve who they are at the core. Narcissistic supply is a behavior or pattern of behaviors that the narcissist will look for in relationships that will ensure that their needs are served. So this is basically about looking for certain things, small, some big, which are attributes in us that they can latch onto and they can exploit to ensure that need for admiration, the inflation of self continues, and it manifests itself in many ways in our lives. It's not necessarily that we have bad behavior or we have a bad character, but it's something that the narcissist will spot in people, and then they will look for ways to exploit to ensure that what you have as a good or as a normal attribute, they can use to get that inflated sense of self, and also to ensure that need for admiration gets served. So it's a self-preservation mechanism that they have. Hence, there are relationships that narcissists will not get into, and there are relationships that narcissists will definitely get into. So relationships that they will not get into are relationships where they will not get the narcissistic supply. And relationships that they will get into are where they can exploit the next person in order to get what they're looking for. Just remember, as I explained previously, that relationships are not necessarily romantic relationships. I'm talking about all forms of relationships with people. So I'm referring to relationships as brotherhood, sisterhood. It can be husband and wife. It can be parent and child. Because we're focusing on narcissism and the faith, we're talking about people who you'll encounter in the faith, who, if their faith is not rooted on loving the Most High, what will happen is that they will look for behaviors in those who genuinely love them, that they will exploit that for themselves. And they can continue in the faith, as we looked last time at the book of Matthew chapter 13, talking about the second heart which is the seed that fell upon the rock, which we did mention that by and by they become offended. So there are people who don't like to be demeaned. They want to be praised by men. They don't enjoy it, particularly when someone else will speak better of them because of the word. So they will consider that as a non-narcissistic supply because it doesn't feed what they're looking for in relationships. So even if it's a brother who is sharing with another brother, if maybe what they're sharing is not received with praises, maybe it's received with questioning because you're not providing the supply that the narcissist is looking for, potentially they may distance themselves from you. Let me just talk about the differences between narcissists and us. I'm saying narcissists and us, assuming that us is people with normal behavior. We look to build relationships, solid relationships, through a give and take mechanism where we give something, we take something. So these are relationships that we're looking to build in a manner that is going to be coherent with our lifestyle, but also they're going to be balanced, that I'm not oppressing you, neither you oppressing me. It's not a manipulative relationship. Even if the balance is not 50-50, but it is a relationship which aligns to our values and it aligns to what we believe. So there's no one in that relationship who's being manipulated to go in a manner which doesn't agree to their fundamental beliefs. So that is the us. The them, which is the narcissist, they exhibit attention-seeking behavior. And through that attention-seeking behavior, they will demand a few things. Amongst those is admiration, as we mentioned. Then there is an ever-persistent requirement for special attention. Remember, we talked about a deep and excessive need for attention and admiration, and also validation and requirements for praises. And in relationships, you will often notice that this is what narcissists are looking for. If they don't receive this, then you're not fueling what the narcissist wants. I do want to say that you and I, we can expect that there will be some requirement for attention, and relationships do work like that. We do give attention. If someone is in need, someone requires help, requires some form of assistance, we do give them the attention. If they're going through something, we do give them some attention. If someone is uncertain about something, they're uncertain about whether what they're doing is correct, we do give a validation and say, yes, you are on the right path, and continue on that right path. We do give each other words of encouragement to say, look, brother, don't drop back, hold strong, stay strong in the faith, hold on to the Most High, do not look on the things of this world, remember why you started this journey. So there is that form of validation that exists in us. What the Most High showed you to do, you are continuing in that, so continue in well-doing. And that is not necessarily a display of narcissistic tendencies. However, when it comes to narcissists, the demands are never ending. So they will not stop. So if you start with attention, they always consistently require that attention. They need to be fed continually. And this is the supply. You're feeding them with a supply. All right. So it's a dopamine hit that a narcissist is looking for. And that also then translates into relationships where you need to give them some form of a supply. Now, in what manner do the supplies come in? We mentioned attention, requirement to always be attended to. And if you don't give them the attention, then they think something is wrong. You threaten their security. So they do want to feel secure, but it's in an unhealthy manner. Compliments and praises all the time. I think we did touch on that briefly in the first episode. Accomplishments, achievements, and success. Sometimes it's about who's going to see me, who's going to give me praises. That's why some other people, when they're successful, they low-key, they want to disappear. They don't want anyone to know about them. And others, it fuels them internally. You will not see it and they become competitive. So those accomplishments drive them as well. However, something that affects relationships directly can be a narcissist who wants to exercise power over others. In many cases, this can be a form of an abusive relationship. So it's a power dynamic which is unhealthy. Relationships can be one where someone is a leader and one is subservient, as long as they both agree to that. And that's what we teach as Hebrews, that there is a form of a rulership, talking about kingship, princes, generals, officers, elders, and also then the subjects of the nation, which are the Hebrews, men in the households, and women and children and so forth. So that does exist. However, there are also power dynamics which are actually manipulative, where exercise of control is through the manipulation of the next person, and manipulation in an emotional manner or in a psychological manner. So narcissists create an environment where they can control you so that you're trapped in there. And why they trap you in that relationship through a form of gaslighting is to ensure that you serve their needs. If people have watched The Matrix, they'll understand that the robots are like narcissists. You give birth to children, but the children are the battery. And that's the type of control environment that narcissists will create, so that you're always giving them that attention and you do not do anything else. In a summary, what I'm trying to explain here with the narcissistic supply is to understand that narcissists are looking for a hit. Just so that we understand, the requirement for a narcissistic supply can come from quite a lot of things. We'll just touch on one briefly here. Childhood trauma can actually stunt growth in children, and that growth means that they don't mature emotionally to become adults the way that we would expect as a society, and that's what creates the narcissist. That's going to require this supply. So a relationship with a narcissist only exists to feed the narcissist. If you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you basically become the one who provides the supply to them. So the narcissist will always manipulate the other person to ensure that they get what they want. So there we have it, brothers and sisters. And I hope now you have an understanding of what the narcissistic supply is and how the narcissistic supply will manifest itself and how it works.
Remember to keep the conversations going among your families and to continue building our Hebrew communities. Please do check me out on my social media platforms. On Instagram, it's Hebrew_Asha. On YouTube, Hebrew Asha. You can also visit my website, asha.co.za. This has been lovely, really. Before you go, remember to follow, subscribe, or click that favorite button. I'm still here. I'm still present. Let us engage. Hebrew Asha signing out. Shalom, shalom.